I'm 86 years old, and I want to tell you something about metabolism that the entire snacking industry has spent billions of dollars trying to make sure you never figure out. Metabolism does not collapse from age, it collapses from interference. And the most consistent, most insidious form of interference in modern life is the habit of eating between meals. Not because food is bad, not because calories are evil, but because the human metabolic system was built around something that modern nutrition culture has almost completely abandoned, and that thing is called the fasting interval. Most people think metabolism is like a fire. They've been told to keep feeding it small amounts constantly to keep it burning. Stoke the fire every 2 hours. Never let it go cold. Eat 6 small meals a day. Keep your metabolism revved up. That is the dominant model. And it is wrong in a way that is not just ineffective. It is biologically backwards. Because the metaphor itself is broken. Your metabolism is not a campfire. It is a sophisticated cycling system, and cycles require completion. A cycle that is perpetually interrupted in its early phase never reaches the phases where the real work happens. Here's what's actually happening inside your body between meals when you leave it alone long enough to do its work. The moment you stop eating, your body begins a process of metabolic switching. In the first hour, your insulin levels start to fall. Not dramatically, just begin their descent. Your cells, sensing the drop in insulin, start to shift their fuel source. This is not a crisis. This is the system working exactly as designed. The body has always known how to feed itself. The problem is we keep interrupting it before it gets the chance. By hour 3 or 4 of not eating, what most people would call the terrifying stretch between lunch and dinner, something remarkable is happening at the cellular level. Enzymes that specialize in fat mobilization become more active. Your fat cells, which have been locked behind an insulin wall, begin to release stored fatty acids into the bloodstream. Your liver begins converting some of those fatty acids into ketone bodies, which your brain actually prefers as fuel over glucose in many contexts. Your muscle tissue becomes more insulin sensitive, not less. Your growth hormone begins to pulse in small bursts. Every single one of these processes is beneficial. Every single one of them requires time without food to occur. And here's what most people miss. Snacking doesn't just pause these processes, it reverses them. The moment you eat anything, even something small, even something healthy, insulin rises. Insulin is the storage hormone. Its job, its entire biological purpose, is to take fuel out of circulation and put it away. The moment insulin rises, fat mobilization stops. Ketone production stops. The cellular cleaning processes that were just getting started stop. And the body has to begin the entire sequence again from zero the next time you stop eating. So if you eat every 2 to 3 hours, you're spending the majority of your waking life in a state where your body never completes a single metabolic cycle. You are perpetually in the early phase, over and over, never reaching the deeper phases where the real biological maintenance happens. It's like starting a dishwasher, opening it after 5 minutes to add one plate and then wondering why the dishes are never clean. The machine is running, the machine is consuming energy, but the cycle never finishes, so the work never gets done. But it goes even deeper than that, because the issue isn't just fat burning. The issue is something called metabolic flexibility. And this is the real secret that nobody is talking about loudly enough. Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to switch seamlessly between burning carbohydrates and burning fat depending on what's available. A metabolically flexible person can go from a carbohydrate-heavy meal to a fat-burning state within a few hours without cravings, without brain fog, without the energy crashes that most people assume are just a normal part of life. A metabolically inflexible person, someone who has trained their body to expect fuel every 2 hours, has lost that switching ability. Their fat-burning machinery is atrophied from disuse. They become entirely dependent on constant glucose input. Not because that's how humans are built, but because they have trained themselves into that dependency through years of preventing the switch from ever having to happen. Cravings between meals are not a sign that your body needs food. They are a sign that your body has forgotten how to access its own stored fuel. That is a trained helplessness. And it was trained, in many cases, by following the very advice meant to help. The hunger you feel between meals and the early weeks of stopping snacking is real, but it is not metabolic need. It is withdrawal from a pattern. It is your body waiting for the external input it has been conditioned to expect, instead of doing what it is fully capable of doing, running on what it already has. Now, here's where it gets even more profound. The fasting interval between meals does something beyond metabolism. It activates a cellular process called autophagy, a word that literally means self eating. And this process is one of the most important discoveries in modern biology, important enough that the scientist who characterized it won the Nobel Prize in 2016. Autophagy is your body's internal quality control system. It identifies damaged proteins, dysfunctional organelles, cellular debris that accumulates through the ordinary work of being alive, and it dismantles them, recycles the components, and uses them to build new structures. It is cellular renovation happening at a scale of complexity that no supplement, no superfood, no pharmaceutical has ever been able to replicate. And autophagy requires a fasting interval to activate. It does not turn on while you are digesting food. It does not run in the background while insulin is elevated. It waits. It waits for the metabolic environment that signals the deeper condition, not the safety of having just eaten, but the deeper biological intelligence of a body that knows how to sustain itself without constant input. 3 meals a day with no snacking gives autophagy a meaningful window to operate twice a day, once in the later morning hours before lunch, once in the evening before sleep. Snacking eliminates those windows entirely. Over years, over decades, the difference in cellular health between these two patterns is not subtle. Most people also don't understand what hunger actually is. They experience it as an emergency, a warning signal, something to be immediately silenced. But the hunger signal, in a metabolically healthy person, is not an emergency. It is information. It is the body saying, I have cleared the last meal. I am ready for the next cycle to begin. That signal, when met with food at appropriate times, creates a rhythm. Hormones entrain to that rhythm. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, actually peaks and then subsides on its own if you don't eat at the first signal. The body is capable of managing its own appetite if you allow the system to function. But if you eat every time hunger appears, you never let the system complete its arc. You interrupt it. And over time, the system stops regulating itself and starts demanding more and more frequent input just to maintain baseline function. The appetite becomes louder because you have trained it to shout. There's also a profound connection between meal timing, the fasting interval, and the circadian system that most people have never considered. Every organ in your body has its own clock. Not a metaphorical clock, but a literal molecular timekeeping system that regulates gene expression, enzyme activity, and cellular repair on a 24-hour cycle. Your liver's clock, your gut's clock, your pancreas's clock, they are all synchronized to your eating patterns. When you eat, you send a time signal to every metabolic organ in your body. 3 clear meals send 3 clear signals with clear intervals between them, giving each organ's clock a stable rhythm to synchronize to. Constant stacking sends dozens of low-level signals throughout the day, creating metabolic noise that the clock system cannot parse. The organs never fully synchronize. Metabolic processes that are supposed to happen in a specific sequence, at specific times, start happening out of order or not at all. This is not speculation. This is what the research on chrononutrition has been revealing for the last 2 decades. The relationship between fasting intervals and inflammation is another layer most people never reach. Chronic low-grade inflammation, the kind that drives aging, metabolic disease, and cognitive decline, is profoundly sensitive to insulin signaling patterns. Elevated insulin is pro-inflammatory. The cycling down of insulin during the between-meal interval is anti-inflammatory. A person who snacks constantly keeps insulin perpetually elevated at low levels, which keeps inflammatory signaling chronically active at low levels. It is not acute. It produces no dramatic symptoms. But it is continuous, and over years it accumulates the way compound interest accumulates, quietly, invisibly, until the sum becomes impossible to ignore. What this means practically is that every time you reach for something between meals, you are not just adding calories, you're resin the salmon in start wound wonders. You are resetting an inflammatory clock. You are extending the duration of a pro-inflammatory state by hours. Multiply that by 3 or 4 snacks a day. Multiply that by 365 days. Multiply that by decades. And you begin to understand why metabolic disease tracks so closely with snacking culture. It is not the snacks themselves. It is the unrelenting disruption of the cycles the body depends on to regulate itself. The real power in not snacking is not discipline. I want to be clear about that. It was never about willpower. It was about understanding the system well enough to trust it. When you understand that the feeling of hunger 3 hours after lunch is not a crisis, but a sign that your body is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, cycling through its fuel sources, running its maintenance programs, reducing inflammation, preparing itself for the next meal. The experience of that hunger completely changes. It becomes almost interesting. You can observe it, you can feel the system working, and you learn something that no amount of nutrition advice ever teaches. Your body knows what it is doing. It has always known. The question is whether you will give it the conditions it needs to do it. The practical application is simpler than any diet. 3 meals, no snacking, adequate gaps, ideally 4 to 5 hours between them. That gap is not empty time. That gap is where the most important metabolic work of your day happens. The fat mobilization, the ketone production, the insulin sensitivity restoration, the autophagy, the circadian entrainment, the reduction of inflammatory signaling. None of it is visible. All of it matters. The results accumulate over months and years in ways that are not flashy but are profound. Stable energy, stable weight, preserved insulin sensitivity, better sleep, clearer cognition, and a metabolic system that does not require constant management because it has been allowed to manage itself. Metabolism does not slow because you age. Metabolism slows because of what aging people habitually do, or more precisely, what they stop allowing their bodies to do. The machinery is still there at 60, at 70, at 80. The enzymatic capacity for fat oxidation does not disappear with decades. The autophagic machinery does not disappear. The circadian clock system does not disappear. What diminishes is the signal. The clean metabolic signal that comes from consistent fasting intervals, from giving the system the silence and the space it needs to run every program it was built to run. And that signal can be restored at any age by doing one thing: stopping the interference. The single most powerful thing you can do for your metabolism today has nothing to do with what you eat. It has everything to do with when you stop. The gap between meals is not a void to be filled. It is where your body does the work that keeps you alive and keeps you well for as long as you allow it to.